On the morning of December 11, 2010, a man hanged himself in his Manhattan apartment. His 2-year-old son was asleep in the next room. The man was 46 years old. He had everything. Money, a family, a name that once meant trust on Wall Street. That name was Madoff. He was Mark Madoff, and he killed himself exactly 2 years to the day after his father was arrested. To understand why a son would do this, you have to understand what his father built. Because Bernie Madoff didn't just steal money. He stole from the people who loved him. He stole from his friends, from widows, from charities, from Holocaust survivors. And for decades, nobody stopped him. Not because they couldn't, because they didn't want to. This is the story of the largest con in human history. And the people who looked away. Bernie Madoff was not supposed to be a monster. He was born in Queens in 1938. Working class. Jewish. The kind of kid who started with nothing. In 1960, he founded a small trading firm with $5,000 he saved working as a lifeguard and installing lawn sprinklers. And here is the part most people forget. The real Bernie Madoff was a genius. His firm helped build the modern stock market. He was one of the pioneers of electronic trading, back when trades were still shouted across a floor. His company became one of the largest market makers in the country. At one point, Bernie Madoff was the chairman of the Nasdaq, the whole exchange. This was not some back-alley swindler. This was a man at the very center of American finance. Respected, trusted, untouchable. And that was exactly the problem. Because somewhere along the way, Bernie Madoff started running a second business. A secret one. And it was built on a single, beautiful lie. Here is how the lie worked. If you gave Bernie Madoff your money, he promised you something almost no one else could. Steady returns. Around 10 to 12%. Every single year. Not huge. Not flashy. Just consistent. The market could crash. Wars could break out. Recessions could come and go. And Madoff's investors would still get their quiet, reliable return. Year after year after year. People thought this was the safest investment on earth. It was the red flag. Because real markets don't work like that. Real markets go up and down. They panic. They soar. A return that smooth, for that long, through every kind of economy, is not possible. It is not skill. It is not genius. It is a lie. Bernie Madoff wasn't investing the money at all. There were no trades. No stocks. No strategy. When you gave him $1 million, he put it in a bank account. And when you wanted your returns, he simply paid you with money from the next investor who walked through the door. That's it. That's the whole scheme. It has a name. It's called a Ponzi scheme. And it is the oldest trick in finance. The catch is simple. It only works as long as new money keeps coming in faster than old money goes out. The moment too many people ask for their cash back at once, the whole thing collapses. So Madoff needed more. Always more. More investors. More money. Forever. And to get it, he did the most cold-blooded thing of all. He turned to the people who trusted him most. Bernie Madoff stole from his own. He was a fixture in the Jewish community. He belonged to the right country clubs. The exclusive ones, in Palm Beach and New York. And inside those circles, people whispered about him like he was a secret blessing. You couldn't just invest with Bernie. You had to be invited. He would even turn people away. And that rejection only made them want in more. It felt like being let into something special. A family. So they gave him everything. Retirees handed over their life savings. Friends gave him the money they'd spent 40 years building. Charities trusted him with their endowments. Among his victims was Elie Wiesel, a man who survived Auschwitz, who won the Nobel Peace Prize, who spent his life teaching the world about evil. Madoff took his personal savings, and he took the money from Wiesel's foundation, around $15 million meant for charity. Wiesel later said there was a word for what Madoff was. He called him a scoundrel, a swindler, a thief who hid behind a smile. This is what makes affinity fraud so devastating. He uses your trust as the weapon. The closer you were to Bernie Madoff, the more he could take. But here is the question that haunts this entire story. A scheme this size, running for decades, taking in tens of billions of dollars. How did nobody notice? The truth is, they did. There was a network of middlemen. They were called feeder funds. These were investment firms whose entire job was to gather money from clients and pour it into Bernie Madoff. Firms like Fairfield Greenwich. They funneled billions of dollars his way. And in return, they collected enormous fees. Hundreds of millions of dollars. Now think about that carefully. These were professionals. Sophisticated financial firms with teams of analysts. Their entire business depended on understanding investments. And they were sending their clients' fortunes to a man who refused to explain how he made money. Madoff wouldn't let them see his trades. He wouldn't let outside firms audit his books properly. His billion-dollar operation was supposedly audited by a tiny accounting firm working out of a strip mall with one active accountant. Every one of these things is a screaming alarm. The feeder fund saw the alarms. And they made a choice. As long as the checks kept clearing, they didn't ask the questions. The returns were too good. The fees were too rich. Willful blindness. They didn't look because they didn't want to know. And they weren't alone. In the year 2000, a financial analyst named Harry Markopolos was handed a simple task. His bosses wanted him to build a product that matched Bernie Madoff's returns. He couldn't do it, so he did the math. And within hours, he knew. He said it took him about 5 minutes to realize the numbers were fake, and a little longer to prove it. Madoff's results were mathematically impossible. The strategy he claimed to use couldn't produce them. The market itself wasn't big enough for the trades he claimed to be making. Harry Markopolos didn't stay quiet. He went to the government, to the SEC, the agency whose entire job is to catch exactly this kind of fraud. He handed them his evidence in 2000, and again in 2001, and again. In 2005, he sent them a detailed report with a title that left no room for doubt. The world's largest hedge fund is a fraud. He laid it all out. 29 separate red flags. He practically drew them a map, and the SEC did nothing. They investigated Madoff more than once, and each time they let him go. They were dazzled by his reputation. He had been the chairman of NASDAQ, after all. How could a man like that be a criminal? For years, Harry Markopolos lived in fear. He thought Madoff might have him killed. He carried a gun. He checked under his car. He was right about everything. And the people with the power to act simply didn't listen. Bernie Madoff later admitted it himself. He was stunned he wasn't caught sooner. In the end, it wasn't a regulator that stopped him. It wasn't a journalist. It was math. In 2008, the financial crisis hit. Markets collapsed. And panicked investors all over the world wanted their money back at the same time. They asked Madoff for about $7 billion. He didn't have it. He never had it. The new money had finally stopped coming in faster than the old money was going out. The machine had run out of fuel. In December 2008, Bernie Madoff called his 2 sons into his apartment, Mark and Andrew. They worked at the legitimate side of his firm, and he told them the truth, that the wealth management business was, in his own words, one big lie. His sons turned him into the FBI that night. When agents arrived the next morning, they asked if there was an innocent explanation. Bernie Madoff said no. There was no innocent explanation. The numbers that came out were almost impossible to comprehend. The account statement showed nearly $65 billion. The real money that people had actually handed over and lost was around $19 billion. The victims numbered around 37,000 people, across 136 countries. In June 2009, a judge sentenced Bernie Madoff to 150 years in prison. The maximum. A symbol. A sentence meant to say, this man should never breathe free air again. But prison was never the real price. The real price was paid by everyone else. There was a French money manager named René Thierry-Megan de la Villa-Huchette. He had invested over $1 billion of his clients' money with Madoff, including his own family's fortune. When it vanished, he could not live with it. Days after the scheme collapsed, he took his own life in his New York office. There was Mark Madoff, the son. He always insisted he knew nothing about the fraud, but he carried the name, and the world would not let him put it down. The lawsuits, the headlines, the shame. On the 2nd anniversary of his father's arrest, he hanged himself. Andrew Madoff, the other son, died of cancer a few years later. He believed the stress of it all brought his illness back. He said his father's fraud killed his brother, and that the man he once loved was a monster. Ruth Madoff, Bernie's wife, lost almost everything and nearly everyone. She was cut off from the life she knew. Her son's gone. Her name poison. Retirees went back to work in their 70s and 80s. People who thought they were secure for life suddenly had nothing. Charities shut their doors. And Bernie Madoff, he lived out his days in a federal prison in North Carolina. He died there in April 2021, at the age of 82. Alone. So what is the lesson here? It is tempting to say the lesson is about one evil man, but that is too easy. Because Bernie Madoff could not have done this alone. He needed the feeder funds who didn't ask. He needed the regulators who didn't listen. He needed a world that wanted the steady returns so badly it refused to question them. The most dangerous lie is not the one that sounds too good to be true. It's the one that sounds just good enough. Calm, consistent, reassuring. Bernie Madoff understood something dark about human nature. People don't want excitement with their savings. They want to feel safe, and a man who promises you safety over and over while everyone around you nods along is the easiest man in the world to believe. The warning signs were never hidden. They were everywhere. The smoothness of it all was the warning. We just didn't want to see it. If you think Madoff was the only one hiding in plain sight, wait until you meet the next one. A company worth billions. Audited. Listed on a major stock exchange. Praised as the future. Except the money in its accounts didn't exist at all. And the man who knew the truth had to run for his life.